Okay, so for the second try for this is going to be about the spiritual side of mental illness. So, number one, mental illness comes from trauma and generational trauma, which includes generational curses, which you could get those for a couple different reasons. So, like, one is if your bloodline's on the altar, two is covenants that are established through different generations, and then three is like unrepentant. I'm trying to make sure I'm saying it. Unrepentant stuff that like somebody in the family does, and then their kid ends up doing it. I'm trying to think of a good example. So like, if I guess since this channel revolves around abuse, I guess I'll use abuse. So like the parents, no, I don't even use it because I want it to be something that I can explain better. Okay, so I guess I'll just use like parents going to jail and then the kids going to jail. So the dad kills somebody and then he goes to jail, and then he doesn't think about the other person or the kids, and the kids had to witness that and see him in jail while they grew up, and so then the kids end up doing it, and then their kids, stuff like that. And then generational demons, which I guess this could be considered a generational curse too, somewhat. But one example is like if the parents have marine spirits and they don't do anything about it, and then their kids get it. That's the simplest example I could think of for that. But overall, generational curses, because since it comes from trauma, it's commonly generational trauma. But of course, there's other things. And then for like the marine spirit, the passed down marine spirits, the thing about those is that those can actually set somebody up to get molested. So they can get molested and get one, or they can have it passed down and then it sets them up to get molested. Because the molester probably has that spirit or whatever spirit, and then it draws them to each other, just like how traumatized, messed up people will attract each other. And it's like how manipulative people always have really good spiritual discernment for other broken people. And that's something that I realized way, way back watching my dad, because he was able to point out some broken lady on Facebook in a heartbeat and be in a relationship with them. But anywho, so, okay, 1.0. So mental illness isn't physical, it's spiritual, because the spirit is your mind, will, and emotions. And then another thing with that is that I'm trying to figure out a good way to explain it. So basically, doctors and scientists have already been talking a lot somewhat recently about how the mind and gut go hand in hand. So like how people say you can feel something in your gut and you knew it wasn't right and stuff like that. Like if something's happening or something weird's going on, people say you can feel it in your gut. Or when you're upset about something, your stomach will be turning and stuff and it'll hurt or whatever. That's because it's actually where the spirit is located. So that's why back in the day, people would say heart, like your emotions are in your heart, but it didn't mean, well, okay, so basically these days when people hear heart, they think about the heart in your chest, but heart actually means center. So like the center would be obviously where your belly button is, like if somebody was to say the heart of the earth or something like that. But these days people really, some people anyway, really just go by what's considered logic and common sense, which takes out the spiritual side of things. And that's why when people hear things like heart, they think that people back in the day actually thought that your emotions were in the heart that's in your chest, but that's not the heart that anybody was talking about. It just meant sinner. Or really, because I'm probably not pronouncing it the best way, because apparently from what I've been told out here, I have a southern country accent, but I'm saying center, not sinner, just to make that clear, because I know what it sounds like I'm saying. Okay, so if the chemical imbalance slide was true, that would be a physical illness like low vitamin D or so the thing with that is, it's already known that the chemical imbalance thing isn't true, and that because mental illness, it really just comes from trauma. The chemical imbalance thing is just bull crap. That's already known to be pseudoscience. And plus, if it was a chemical imbalance, there would be a test for it. And that would also mean that there's something you're supposed to be eating that you're not eating, or something you're supposed to be doing that you're not doing. So things like that. Okay, so number 2. All mental illness is just different forms of double-mindedness. Many labels such as personality disorder, schizophrenia, ADHD, bipolar, and ODD are just off-branches of complex trauma. Personality disorders depend on how you process your trauma, whether you choose the good or bad side. Because as you may know, trauma is what happens on the inside of you, not just what happens to you. So like, trauma isn't just about what happened to you, but it's about how you process it and what it does to you internally. Hopefully that's a good explanation of what I'm trying to say. And so for 2.0, this goes along with how all mental illness comes from trauma. Deliverance ministers, specifically in the Western world, okay, no, hold up, I'm not reading this right. Deliverance ministers say trauma is the number one reason for demonization in the Western world. So child abuse is a really big issue, and I'm glad that people are finally somewhat starting to point it out. I mean, it was already known, but the thing is, a lot of people don't care, or they're working in systems that are the cash for kids system, where they get paid to help abusers and all that. So number 3, trauma creates holes in the soul and shatter/fragment the mind. These holes are called windows. Windows are ways spirits get in that are out of your control, and doors are ways spirits get in because of things you did. So this would be considered a window, because it's not because of something you did, it's because of something that somebody else did. And if you study demonology, as far as deliverance, you'll learn about this difference between windows and doors. So, okay, wait a minute. And demons come in through them and cause mental illness, and then being the holes in the soul that happen when you go through trauma. Because the thing is, there is a certain way that things are supposed to go, and when things don't go that way, then you pretty much end up messed up. So like, an example of this is, when you're a baby, your parents are supposed to talk to you and feed you and all that stuff, but when they don't talk to you, you end up getting brain damage because your brain doesn't develop how it's supposed to in the language areas and other areas. And you end up not knowing how to talk. And it also causes a lot of other issues. Like, if you research feral children, that's a big example of what happens to a person when things don't go how they're supposed to go. Just like how if you don't have a mom, you could end up feeling some type of way because of that. If you don't have a dad, you can end up feeling some type of way because of that. Because there's a way that things are supposed to go. When they don't go that way, you end up messed up. Okay, so did I read all this already? This is part of why all forms of child abuse is a demonic ritual. The height of paganism and Luciferianism is child abuse for a number of reasons. And number 4, one example is the spirits of rejection, abandonment, and the spirit I recently found out about called people pleasing, which makes sense because honestly, if there's a spirit of rejection and abandonment, it makes sense that people pleasing is one too. The spirits' names are based off of their functions. So obviously, you can tell by the names that the spirit of rejection and abandonment and the spirit of wait a minute, rejection and abandonment and the spirit of people pleasing would obviously revolve around different things like complex trauma and BPD. In fact, the strong man, which if you don't know what that is, the strong man is basically the head spirit in somebody when you're okay. So like if you're doing deliverance, there could be a lot of different spirits, but there's one spirit that's like kind of on top of, well, over all of them, and that's the one that has to be cast down first. So in a lot of deliverances, the strong man is like the spirit of rejection, and then all the other spirits from all the trauma the person went through are under the spirit of rejection. So because the person's parents didn't want them, they got the spirit of rejection, and because they had the spirit of rejection from their trauma and they felt rejected, it made them do a whole bunch of other things which also revolved around spirit. So like because the person had the spirit of rejection, they like to sleep around with different people because they didn't feel like they were good enough and all they wanted was love. Hopefully that's a good example. Obviously people please will revolve around stuff like codependency. And I already know that a lot of people, I mean, if anybody even watches this, because nobody really watches my videos, I already know that a lot of people are going to get offended by this because for whatever reason, especially in the Western world, I mean, people already don't really believe in this stuff in the Western world anyway. And that's part of why people are so messed up. Also, along with the fact that with all the things that go on, I mean, mental illness is pretty much normalized and insanity is pretty much normalized in the Western world. And it's considered normal to not know what gender you are. But anywho, people get offended by this because for whatever reason, people feel like being demonized is an insult, and it means that they're a bad person, that something's wrong with them and that they did something bad. So when they hear it, they feel like it's somebody talking junk about them. Almost, basically, they feel like it's like calling somebody a, a hoe or something, and they feel like it's an insult. But honestly, people really knew about this, they would get that it really is an insult because it doesn't even mean that you specifically did something yourself for it to happen. So yeah, hopefully this was a good explanation of this, and maybe, well, not maybe, hopefully I'll have the time, and if I do, I'll link some books in the description that you could get about this. It doesn't mean that the books are going to say specifically what I said, but they're going to be about demonology and deliverance and all that, or at least about spirituality and trauma. I try to find some that like really revolve around this topic, meaning trauma, really the trauma part. That's the important part, because this is what's messing a lot of people up. Because like I said, child abuse is an agenda, not a coincidence. Well, I said that, I don't even know what video that was. I mean, I've been saying it a lot lately.